Welcome to a special episode of Leaders Talk. My guest today is Madeline Hoffmann, and she has cycled from Germany to Australia.
During my journey, there was this one quote that I reminded myself daily to, and it says, "One can always go back to safety or forward towards growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again." I definitely had a lot of fear on my journey, but fear also keeps us safe, and fear is there to be overcome.
Leaders Talk, the interview podcast portraying leaders who are committed to better leadership, better organizations, and a better world. Hosted by Managing Partner of Leadership Choices and co-founder of the Cosmic Foundation, Karsten Drath.
So this is a podcast on leadership, and there's a tiny little red thread around people who are adventurers and or who do adventurous things, and that has to do with self-leadership to a large degree. And Jonas Deichmann was here, Charlie Walker was here, and now we have Madeline. Madeline decided, she lives in Australia, she's born in Germany, she learned that her father is from Turkey, and she made the decision to cycle from Germany to Turkey, which is about 4,000 kilometers. And then not only she met her father, but also she decided to carry on and cycled all the way from Turkey back to Australia, minus the water, obviously, and minus a few dangerous places. And that tour took her 15 months. And it's quite an impressive tour. And she had some amazing experiences. And it's a very long podcast, but it's worth every minute if you're into adventure, traveling, or being inspired by a solo female traveler, and how she dealt with the challenges along the way, and also the magic moments. That's the podcast for you. So let's go right into the conversation with Madeline Hoffmann. A very warm welcome to Madeline Hoffmann. Madeline, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Karsten.
Madeline, you are a very special guest because we have in our podcast, which is actually a leadership podcast, there's a little niche around adventurers, around people who did something outstanding, did something very courageous. And you did several of these things. One of it is you traveled by bicycle from Germany via a lot of countries and finally to Australia, and you arrived back home 6 months ago. I mean, where to start? What were things that led to this major endeavor in your life?
Things leading up to this was, I grew up in Germany and with my single mom, and I was the youngest of 3 kids. And growing up, I actually never had any idea of the identity of my father. So this question kind of plagued my childhood and also my early adulthood. I always wanted to know who my father is. And I guess I was a little bit of a tomboy, so I was really longing for someone to do all these boyish things with me. Like, I was really into soccer, and none of my family was really into sport. Like, I was surrounded by 2 sisters, a mother, a grandmother. And so the question was always there: who am I? And I grew up in Germany and eventually kind of immigrated to Australia. And I've been living here for almost 9 years now. And I think about 4 years ago, actually during COVID, I experienced a breakup from a long-term relationship. And many other things happened, like probably for so many other people around the same time. COVID was happening. I lost my job. I broke up with my long-term boyfriend, and yeah, my outlook on life suddenly completely changed. And I wasn't even sure if I would stay in Australia or if I would go back to Germany. So I felt like I was at this intersection in my life. Where do I want to go from here? And yeah, I guess the world decided where I would go from there, because COVID happened and Australia closed the border for about 2 years. So I was meant to stay in Australia. And during this time here in lockdown, I got more and more into cycling. Of course, as a German, I already cycled in Germany, more like commuting, cycling to work and back home. And I never grew up like doing any big rides with my family or anything like that. I actually learned cycling quite late, like because we didn't have the money for bicycles when I was a kid. And then, during COVID, I started to do bigger and bigger rides. Like when I say big rides, I say, oh, here's my first 30-kilometer ride. And then there's my first 50-kilometer ride. And yeah, that went up to 80. And I really enjoyed cycling. And it was quite surprising how far I could travel with a bicycle. And then I started to watch my first bike touring documentary. It was actually 2 guys cycling from Berlin to Beijing, 2 German guys.
Zwei nach Shanghai, or I think it was, right? It were the brothers from Berlin, right?
Ich glaube, das hieß Berlin to Beijing.
Okay.
Aber ich bin mir nicht sicher. Das war auf Netflix, glaube ich.
Okay.
So it was the first documentary I ever watched about bike touring, and I was stunned. I was like, wow, this is so cool. This is something I would like to do. And this is how the idea started. And I couldn't get it out of my mind because I always wanted to travel for a year, but I never had the idea that it could be possible with a bicycle. And I love adventure. I love unusual things. So I thought to myself, okay, where would I go? And I thought of South America because I had studied Spanish for about 2 years at that stage. And I've never been to South America. But simultaneously, I knew I couldn't go anywhere before I had not met my father. And the backstory to this is, so I didn't mention earlier, when I moved to Australia, after about 1 year, at this stage, I actually had made peace with never finding out who my father is. So I still had no idea. There was no father in my birth certificate. All my questions for my mother and my relatives were just left unanswered. So that was obviously very frustrating and challenging for me. So I decided for myself, okay, you have to let it go. And then I went to Australia, maybe as far away as possible. Who knows? But while I was living in Australia, I suddenly got a text from my sister. She was like, hey, how are you? And as we Germans know, hey, how are you is not a thing we ask each other, right? We don't ask these small talk questions. So I was like, oh, what's going on? And then she explained to me that a man got in contact saying he's our father. I was like, okay, what's his name? And she said the name, and I was like, okay. It didn't sound German. And I was confused, and I said, what nationality is that? Turkish, she said. And at that moment, I was just super confused. And I remember I went to the mirror and I had a good look at myself. And I thought, Turkish? I am half Turkish. And then so that was when I was 26. And of course, I was in Australia. He at that time was in Germany, because for most of my life, he lived in Germany, not in Turkey. So we had a phone conversation, and it was a very, very challenging phone conversation for me. And after that first conversation, I tried to keep in touch with him via texts. But every time he texted me, I had like this anger coming up in me. I was just not ready, because during the phone conversation, I also got to know that he was actually living my whole life 20 minutes away from me. So at that stage, I couldn't deal with all of that information. And I just decided to withdraw for myself. And of course, he and Turkey were always in the back of my mind, because suddenly I knew I am half Turkish. So wherever I would go, if there would be Turkish music, Turkish food, or a Turkish movie, I would think, this is part of me. But I also had zero connection in some ways to it. Besides that, we obviously have a lot of Turkish people in Germany, so we know a bit about the culture from there. But I've never been in Turkey, don't speak Turkish, nothing. And then, so the years passed, and he was always in the back of my mind. And I was longing for so long to meet my father. But yeah, I wasn't ready. And then 2020, I actually felt ready. I was about to go to a wedding in Germany. And I thought, maybe I can go to Turkey at the same time, because at this stage he had moved back to Turkey. And then COVID happened and the world shut down. And so my plans were all canceled. And then my life changed a lot. And like I mentioned earlier, I got more and more into cycling, watched a bike touring documentary, and I thought, okay, Germany to Turkey, cycling from my old heritage, Germany, to my new heritage, Turkey, and meet my father for the first time, and visit Turkey, see its culture, its people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Where to go next? So there are so many questions in my mind. So one is, I mean, I can imagine it must be super, super difficult to wanting to know who your father is, and your entire family says nothing, just silence. Does he give you any clue? I would be mad. I would be upset. I mean, how did you cope with that?
Yeah, I guess it was a very, very challenging thing to cope with. I guess I'm still working on it, I think it's a process every day, literally. Like, and sometimes forgiveness is easier than on other days. Like during my journey, it was easier, for example, while after it is actually more challenging. I try to make peace for myself, and I guess it helps to think that parents are also just people.
Just humans. With their flaws and their shortcomings, and yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
So, I mean, maybe a good and the bad is that you were forced to learn how to work with yourself, with your inner world, with your emotions, with your, with forgiving rather than giving the space to anger and bitterness.
I mean, I was, of course, there is and was anger. Like, it's challenging to, deal with it and forgive. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's none.
Sure.
But I think I'm putting this anger, I'm putting it into energy to maybe my journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you only mentioned the smallest part of your journey, which is to Turkey, which I guess is like what, 3,000 to 5,000 kilometers or something. But you then cycled on, and that was the much, much longer part, actually, right? It's like probably double as long as the first part of your journey. So that requires some energy. Yeah, quite a lot,
Yeah.
mental energy. Before we go there, and I have so many questions around that trip. There is a time before, and you had a stint into fashion. You studied fashion design in Sigmaringen in Germany, and then you went and worked in New York for a small private label, came back. So what was the driving force to go into fashion, and what made you leave fashion?
I think I've always been a creative person. I always had the dream to work with my hands. And I was unsure. I always had a very particular style, one could say. And I saw fashion as an art. And then, while studying, I loved the drawing, I loved the sewing. And when I then went to New York, it was amazing. Like, I was working for a small label, so it was a real hands-on experience, from the pattern to the sewing to liaising with the factory, which was actually right in New York. So it wasn't like outsourced in China or anything like this. And also experiencing Fashion Week was amazing. But then when I returned from New York and I was working in Germany, and I was very, very fast disillusioned by the whole industry, because I love the environment for once. And you could just see it's a everything has to be commercial. Everything is fast. Most of the time, labels just copy each other's products. So, and I was working mostly on the computer. Nothing was creative or hands-on anymore. So very soon after that, I decided, wow, if this is fashion, I don't want to work in this industry. And I literally left Germany to travel again.
Okay. And then you moved to Australia, and that's the part that you already shared with us. Then all that, finding your father finding you, or finally finding the courage to connect. And I can imagine, being a father, once you have waited for a couple of years, in your mind, it starts like, well, I have waited now for so long, I can't just reach out now. And then the more time passes, the more difficult probably it gets to find the courage and find the words to say, hey, after 25 years, I finally decided to say I'm here,
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with that journey. So this is a project that is sizable. I mean, and most people will never do anything like that. And so depending on who you talk to, people go probably like, are you nuts? Is that safe? Have you thought that through? Have you lost your mind? What were like typical reactions in your peer group?
I think people might have just thought I'm joking. I remember I quit my job And my boss just asked me, okay, who are you leaving us for? Like, which label are you going to? And I'm like, no, I'm going to cycle from Germany to Turkey. And I don't think anybody actually believed I could do it or that it's possible. So yeah, I think it was just utter confusion.
Mm-hmm. So in Australia, you also worked in the fashion industry still?
At the beginning, not, but seeing as I met somebody here, I tried to, find I wanted to give fashion another go because I'm not a quitter. So I wanted to, I do have that passion for fashion, but not like the industry works,
Got it. Okay. And then, that was I mean, you did some bicycling, but it's not that you did many of these projects before. So first step, get your gear together, right? So what was your approach here?
So for me, it was very important that most of the gear is secondhand. So I joined like groups on Facebook, like bikepacking, long distance gear, and it was difficult because all the bicycles were so expensive, and I had no idea what I'm actually looking for. And it was then actually the first bike that came up under $1,000 in my size. And yeah, so bit by bit, I tried to source all the pieces, which is obviously very specific gear, from Facebook Marketplace. So I had to pick up all the things all over Sydney, like 2 pannier bags here, 2 pannier bags there. And hunt all of these items down. And yeah, but for me, it was very important because my whole lifestyle in my private life, I shop everything secondhand. Like, it's very important for me. So I wanted to make it an aspect of my journey as well.
Okay, good. So you got your cobalt blue steel gravel bike, and the Ortley panniers and all that good stuff, the gear that is kind of the standard. We have pretty much have the same setup, by the way. And I also noticed that you have the same tent, or I have the same tent as you. Was that this right from the beginning? Because that's a very wise choice. Or did you talk to a lot of people to learn from them, or did you observe, or how did you get intelligence?
I mean, at the beginning, when this idea started of this trip, I was consuming a lot of vlogs on YouTube, but kind of at a certain stage, I had to distance myself from it because, first of all, I want to experience it myself. And also, I think you shouldn't overthink the gear in the end. I mean, if you're in Europe, for example, you can always buy things on the way. Also, I'm a person, I think I lost almost everything on the way, so I needed to replace absolutely everything besides my bicycle and my bags. But oh dear, I lost so many things. So but no, the tent I had from the beginning, that was also a secondhand purchase of Facebook Marketplace. And the only thing that was really important for me was, of course, the weight. It's still quite a heavy tent, I think, with 2.2 kilo. But the other aspect is that I didn't want a one-person tent because I want to, as I'm a solo woman traveling, I want that people from the outside think there could be 2 people in there. That's why I bought a 2-person tent.
Okay. Wow, that's a consideration. I mean, I also have a 2-person tent, but simply for laziness reasons and that I like the space. But that's a totally different thing to think that protection and safety element as a solo female traveler. Well, actually, did you? I mean, my wife, she does some pilgrimage too, so she travels on her own, and she's always met with, "This is so great that the woman travels alone." Is that something that is upsetting at one point in time? They say, "Why is that so great?" I mean, man does it, why shouldn't a woman do it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying not to get upset by it, but I just think like it should be normal for me. Women and men are equal. So for me, it's like, yeah, of course I can do it. It's no problem. It's like I can park my car in reverse. Like I can carry something heavy. I can do all of these things. So, but thank you. Yeah, sure. It's great.
I'm not very good in parallel parking, I have to say. So you
I actually, sorry, I never owned a car, so I don't know how I am right now in parking. Like, it was actually one of my things I said when I was a teenager that I never want to own a car. I'm not sure if it's gonna work out, seeing as I'm in a huge country and a four-wheel drive isn't a bad thing in the bush, but we'll see.
yeah, well, time will show, but I'm pretty sure once you set your mind to it, you will be great in parallel parking. I'm pretty sure about that. You, first of all, you needed to quit your job. Then you needed to get an apartment. I know we have seen you have a cat. So all of that, there was a decision to let go of, right? Or to sublet or to.
Yeah. So with my flat, the journey originally was planned for 6 months. So I quit my job, which was more difficult than it sounded at the beginning because you let go of all of your safety. And honestly, finding a job in fashion in Australia is not such an easy thing. And during COVID, I had lost my job. So I guess it came with like a lot of anxiety to let it go by myself, right? To just quit it. So that was one step. The next step was my apartment. And I knew I would go for 6 months. And I had the idea to just sublease it because then when I come back, so I can leave everything like it is with all my furniture. I have a cat as well, so I need someone to take care of the cat. So I rented it out to two girls and bought cat food for 6 months. And yeah.
Okay, so that was all this preparation, and that requires a lot of emotional processing, I can imagine, to say, okay, I'm letting go now. I'm removing layers and layers of safety, and now I'm free. What was talking about budget? I mean, other than the flights were like singular big ticket costs, right? But what did you plan for any like daily allowance or monthly allowance?
Seeing as I'm a terrible planner, I didn't do anything like this. In my normal life, I'm a very frugal person. So I don't really spend money on things. I remember one of my colleagues asking me once, what do you spend money on? And I responded with vitamins and nuts. So, like I said, I buy secondhand clothes. So for my journey, I kind of knew it would be as little as possible every day. So as much wild camping or staying with warm showers or couch surfing hosts as possible, as little comforts as possible. Yeah. But like I said, I'm kind of living my daily life after that already. This is how I guess, try to save up towards this. So yeah, I didn't really have a budget. As little as possible.
Did you go all the way to dumpster food? I mean, I met people along the way who would also go to dumpster and see that they get, what's thrown away from the supermarkets. Is that all the way there, or?
So during the journey, I actually didn't do that, but because I didn't have the idea. But now I would consider it. Why not? I would do it here in Australia. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I met a young lady. She was doing that, and she also had you need a special key, to open these dumpsters because they are locked for a reason. And she actually had that, so she was a pro. She really knew how to do that. I was pretty impressed, and I'm far away from doing that, so it always amazes me if people go all the way, because then you can actually reduce your footprint cost-wise to close to zero, right? I mean, there's not much left. If you sleep in a tent, if you stealth camp, if you warm shower, if you go dumpster food, I mean, there's water, and maybe some mechanical things that you need along the way or gear, but other than
Exactly.
that, yeah. Okay, cool. So you flew, and you took probably for cost reasons, I figured you took the longest possible way to get to Germany,
Yeah,
via the
it was
other
the
way,
cheapest.
via the Pacific to LA to Denver to Germany. By the time you were there, you're finally officially dead, and you know, and your bicycle came along, which is a wonder, a miracle in itself, because you had to unload it in the US, check it in again, and this praying that it will finally arrive. And I guess that was an emotional turmoil right there in its own right.
Yeah, I mean, even the day before the journey, it was whoa, like it was such a roller coaster, very emotional. Of course, I never had done anything like this, never flew with a bike. And yes, then there were 3 flights, not just one flight, 3 flights. So how to pack the bicycle and how to get to the airport with that huge box. And then, yeah, flying, I think it was in the end like 35 hours to Germany. And I think I remember being at Denver airport and I was just like an embryo and I thought like I was so tired. And yeah, when I finally boarded the flight to Germany, I was actually in tears because I haven't been at that stage in Germany for about 4 years. So it felt like a very long time. And it was so unreal for me to, yeah, because at heart, it will always be your home. And during COVID, it was just like you were not able to go there. And it was the longest time I've not have been in Germany. So yeah, it was like, wow, finally going home.
Yeah, lot of emotions right there. And then you landed in Frankfurt, and you took the box, you assembled your bike, which is also a moment that always, I get anxiety over, like, will it work? Will I get everything back in order? No dents in the wheels, or no, that it's not, torn or whatever. Did you actually prepare, like, the mechanical side of things? Like, did you try to learn it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a handy person. So seeing as I grew up with no father, no brother, no grandmother, I felt like I was the one in the family who would repair things when they are broken. So I kind of have the logical thinking behind it. But before the journey, the city of Sydney organized like some free bike maintenance workshop where you could learn like the basics of bike maintenance. So I did that, and I guess that was about it. I knew how to fix a puncture and yeah, stuff with the derailleur I was probably not too familiar with. And also it was the first bike I owned that actually has a drop bar. So that was new for me. But the rest was just like learning by doing. I thought either I can figure it out when something goes wrong. I made sure I had the tools. Then obviously like taking the bike apart, it's like, okay. The hardest at that stage was getting the pedals off. I remember that was quite difficult.
Use a lot of force. You need a lot of force. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you'd never done it, you're kind of like, am I doing the right thing? And then when I landed in Frankfurt, sleep deprived how I was and jet lagged, putting the bike back together definitely took much, much longer than I imagined it would. I did it for the first time. And yeah, I was getting nervous. And the funny thing is that I couldn't do the most simple thing, which was pumping up the tires. I always struggle with the Presta valves. By now I have figured it out, but at that stage I was still new to those valves.
Yeah, very filigrane, very tiny little thingies.
Yeah, exactly. But there was like this man, I think he he noticed me, and then he was waiting for his son, and he came over and he chatted actually about his bike touring journey through Australia. So yeah, we had a conversation, and he was like, hey, can I help you somehow? And I'm like, do you want to pump up those tires? So yeah, that was when I met the first friendly person on my journey. And yeah, eventually I calmed. You in this situation, you just have to accept that things will take much longer than you want them to do, and just try to take your time and work through it, because there's no point of stressing, then everything just gets worse.
And when you are on these journeys, there are the moments that you try to prepare for, and you have all that stuff ready and you've thought it through, which maybe is for you less than for others. You go more with the flow, but then there's others, the things that your equipment breaks or you lose something, and then you have to improvise. That improvisation, this is when it actually becomes fun, right? And you have to be in the moment. And that happened to you right in the beginning. You lost your Garmin, right? The first couple of days, you lost your bicycle computer, your navigation device.
Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, I never had figured out how to actually use it. So the way I was in Frankfurt. I still had no idea how I would navigate myself through through to Turkey.
The world, yeah.
Exactly. But so at the beginning, I think at a certain stage I had a docket on my handlebar with tape where I wrote down the next villages I had to go to, because Germany has such a great bike system that they actually have great signage for which village is in which direction. So that worked. But early on in my journey, I met this wonderful family on my second day. And it was when I had my first puncture on my second day. And yeah, they invited me to stay in their house. So I met my first hosts, and they were so kind and welcoming and fed me, and yeah, gave me a bed. And they also gave me access to their Komoot profile. So this is how my journey with Komoot started.
Yeah, we have that in common too. Yeah, so I'm also a Komoot user, and like you, Komoot created some surprises and led me to places that, like up a hill to a beautiful lake, like, hey, you got to see that in the middle of a thunderstorm, and then down on the other side. And I was like, what the heck, I had 1,000 meters in elevation just for this beautiful lake in a thunderstorm. Thank you, Komoot. So
yeah.
You had some stories like that, right?
Oh, I call it Komoot did it again. I had multiple of these stories, including bush bashing over the border from Montenegro into Albania. Like, because Komoot led me on a road. It was a fresh, paved, nice, smooth road, which suddenly just stopped into bushland. And I was like, well, the border was meant to be in like 500 meters or a kilometer or so. And I checked the map, and if I would go around it, it was about 15 to 20 or more kilometers. And I was like, no way. So I left my bike on the road, and then I started to walk because I saw this trample path. So I started to check out if I could actually make it through. And then I decided, okay, this is it. You just have to go with it. So, but it got so rocky, and so it was more hike bike. So I had to take the bags off, carry the bags for this 1 kilometer or so, and then come back and then carry the bike as well, because it wasn't even pushable. And then I was on the other side, and I was like, I guess I'm in Albania. And I was just thinking, does that make me illegal? Like, I was like, I just shrugged my shoulders, and then I carried on.
Okay, cool. And so let's look at the tour from Germany to Turkey. So what I recall was Germany, France, Switzerland, Italy, I would guess.
Yes. Yep.
And then somehow you went into Greece, but what was the exact route?
So from Italy to Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, back to Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia, back to Albania, Greece, and then Turkey.
Okay. And as you said, no plan is your plan. That means you had no timetable, you had no set itinerary. That was like rough direction southeast, right? That's where Turkey sits, and somehow you will get there, and then you'd like took it like on the go. What's next, or what informed your decision making?
You mean before reaching Turkey, so the way to Turkey?
Exactly.
Yeah, it was a good question. I guess until Italy, I kind of followed a little bit along the Eurovelo 5. And then from Italy on, it was a bit more vague. And so sometimes I would ask questions on Facebook, or there are these WhatsApp cycling groups. And if there's something really beautiful I should see, or I would look up what routes are around. Like, for example, I went back to do the Velebit Mountains in Croatia, which was kind of out of my way, but I'm so happy I did that. That was really beautiful. So, I mean, for me, it was not only to go the most direct way to Turkey, it was the journey itself, like the way itself, like the traveling aspect as well, and not just to get as fast as possible to Turkey.
Yeah, I figured when I followed you that and I was wondering, is that sightseeing, wanting to see all there is, or is that also that, maybe I'm going too fast. I need to prepare for that moment, and I want that other detour. So was it,
I mean, I definitely wanted to travel, so I wanted to see places because, yeah, the way I grew up and also always working while studying, there was never the opportunity even just to see that much of Europe. Mm-hmm. So after Italy, actually, every country was new for me. So I hadn't traveled that much in Europe yet. So, and yeah, it was an absolutely stunning experience. Like, it was just getting more and more interesting, And yeah, experiencing autumn in Europe was wonderful because I live in Australia, and we have autumn a little bit, but not as much as in Europe,
You started your tour in summer when it was really hot. Were you aware that you were cycling towards winter? I mean, was that in your mind that it gets cold and all that?
Yeah, originally I was hoping to actually start my tour in July, but then I delayed my whole journey because one of my closest friends got married in America, and another close friend finally wanted to come and visit Australia. And when a friend from Germany comes all the way to Australia, you won't say no. So I had to push everything back. And in the end, it was okay. I mean, yes, I was facing winter in Turkey and really, really cold winter, but I think it's all part of the experience. And I was actually very lucky with the weather until Turkey because it barely rained. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to ride in brutal heat. I mean, that's what I had after. So
yeah, exactly.
I had enough of that.
Okay. And let's talk about hospitality. So all the countries that you mentioned in the first leg of your journey, which were moments where you had experienced crazy hospitality?
I mean, the further south I went, so in this first leg, Germany to Turkey, the better the hospitality I got, I would say. However, even on my first and second day in Germany, I experienced really warm hospitality, and this was very nice for me because it was my home country, and you know how we get stereotyped as being cold. And I just experienced this warmth, and I experienced it after watching all of these YouTube videos of other cyclists experiencing it. And I was like, I wasn't sure if this is going to happen for me. And yeah, it just shows you how good the world and the people actually are. And I experienced hospitality in every country, sometimes when the places are more touristy, it's lesser, but every country was great. I mean, like, but then of that first bit, Turkey really set the bar high. Like, you could feel the Middle East was starting. Yeah.
Okay. There's an element that I call traveler's luck. That is when something bad happens, but that bad enables something great to happen, which is like out of this world, which you could never dream up. And if you would write it down, it would be like total cliche. What moments were there in that first leg of your journey?
I mean, so many. When you cycle and you're out in nature, you're just much more in tune with things like this happening. You can connect the dots much easier. And I guess one of these moments were in Bosnia. I named my bike Sjekoze after a village in Bosnia.
Sjekoze?
Sjekoze, yeah.
Sjekoze, okay.
Yeah. So it's a tiny village in Bosnia, and that was just before I was about to head deeper and deeper into the remote countryside of Bosnia, doing the Giro Trail, which is a trail that follows the old railway. And yeah, I was still quite green behind my ears. Like, that was probably when I had the first big problem with my bicycle. And I actually got it serviced in Mostar because I knew I would get into more and more remote territory. So I wanted to make sure everything is good. But suddenly when I cycled, my gears weren't working anymore. And since I have a drop bar and I didn't really know how a drop bar works, where do all these cables go to, and like I mentioned, I'm not so experienced with the derailleur or the shifter. So yeah, in that moment I had a bit of anxiety flaring up because I was in the middle of nowhere, and just about to head into more and more remote territory. And so I decided I can't go on like this because the next days would be remote. So I have to figure out what is going on. And I stopped and I pushed my bike back to the village. And the village had about 4 houses. And I just stopped in front of a house and just bent down to try to see what the problem is. And in this moment, a guy from the house is walking towards me and he says something in Croatian. And I said to him, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak Croatian. Can you speak English?" And in that moment, he responds with the thickest Western Sydney accent, "Yeah, what's the problem?" Like, and I'm just looking at him and thinking, is that an Australian accent? And he invites me into his house. He tries to calm me down because, yeah, I didn't really have a problem before with my bicycle. So everything always felt a bit like the end of my journey. I'm not going to make it to my father. I'm not going to get to Turkey. Who knows how long my journey will be delayed. And yeah, he took me into his place and asked what the problem is. And together we tried to figure it out. Anyway, during the conversation, I found out that he indeed was living in Sydney. So for the last 15 years, he has been living there. And he just came back from Sydney 2 days ago to visit his parents.
What are the odds, right? What are the odds? Yeah.
Exactly. I couldn't stop laughing. I mean, it felt like the universe had sent me an angel. And his parents, because nobody else in this village spoke English. So it would have been very hard for me to communicate with anybody else but him. And as we couldn't fix the problem immediately, we tried to, we just had a good time. His parents took me in like their third child. It was very heartwarming. And they also decided that I would spend the night there. They even gave me self-made slippers, which I actually now have here with me in Sydney in Australia. So yeah, it was just like this heartwarming experience of them really making me feel part of the family. And in the end, we also found a way to fix my bicycle with a guy in the village. He called and he came and we got a gear cable. In the end, the gear cable broke. So it wasn't that big of a problem, right? But if you don't know, it's scary.
No, absolutely. Great, great. Such a great story. And maybe for the first leg, the question around lowlights. What were times where you felt despair, where you felt alone, angry?
I think the lowest I felt was probably in Greece. Greece itself, I mean, it started a little bit in Albania because I got sick in Albania. So my stomach was upset for about 2 weeks and it just didn't get better. And eventually I left Albania for Greece, and Greece was the last country before Turkey. So emotionally, it got more and more difficult. It was almost impossible to ignore that Turkey will be the next country. So on one hand, it felt like my journey was coming to an end. And on the other hand, I was also not really sure if I'm ready, I guess. And then, through that, the first leg of my journey, I had punctures over and over and over again. Back then, I didn't know about Schwalbe marathon tires.
That was my next question.
Exactly. So it was, then I was hosted by a guy in Elazona in Greece. And he told me about Schwalbe tires. He's like, why don't you have Schwalbe tires? You're German. I'm like, Schwalbe? Huh? What's that? He's like, puncture proof. And I'm like, oh. So we tried to buy these tires for myself. He actually had a bicycle shop himself, but he didn't have any which would fit my bicycle. So we called all the bike shops in surrounding cities. And the only place that had them available was in Alexandropoli. And that was about a 4-day ride.
Oof.
Yeah. And I said to him, don't worry, I can deal with another 4 days of punctures. But then I got slammed. I remember, because the problem is I like going off-road. So whenever there's an opportunity to go off-road instead of the road, I'd rather do that because I want to take the scenic route. I don't want to ride. I always said, I'm not here to ride highways. Like, I'm not here to ride the big roads. And that one day I had a really good day cycling in Greece. And I looked like my commute wanted to lead me that off-road. And I looked at it and I was like, should I not? I had a really good day. I cycled 90 kilometers and I thought I could probably do 10 more until the sun sets, which wasn't too far off. And then I cycle and then I hear, and I'm like, oh no, I'm like, it's okay, just stay calm, fix it. Yeah, I started to fix that puncture, and I put it back in, and I hear again air coming out of the tire, and I'm like, okay, stay calm, stay calm. And the sun was about to set, and in the meantime I was fixing so many punctures. I just wanted to get out of there to get myself to a campsite, and eventually I made it. And the next day I woke up and both of my tires were deflated. So at that stage in my journey, I already had so many punctures that I had no more patience for any of these punctures. And I was literally one day ride away. So that same day, I was meant to reach Alexandropoli to buy the new tires. But I started fixing the punctures, and once again, continuously somewhere air was deflating the tires. And then I started going through the tire millimeter by millimeter, and I found about 30 thorns. So my complete tube was like Swiss cheese. And I obviously had some spare tubes, so instead of fixing that one, I tried to fix another one. But whenever I tried to fix a puncture, another hole popped up, and I was running out of patches, and I was running out of glue, and I was actually sitting there, and I called it breaking point, because I mean, now I'm laughing about that because it's nothing to anything else I experienced after. But at that stage, like I said, with the punctures, it was just really, really bad. I had reached a point where I couldn't handle it anymore. And then I was fixing these punctures for hours, running out of glue and patches, and the bike shop probably would be closed until I get there. And it was a Saturday. And Sunday in Greece, everything is closed. So I called the bike shop and I told them my situation. And I'm like, I don't know if I can make it in time to Alexandropoli. And yeah, after I used the last patch and the last bit of glue, I was just praying to the universe, because I was in the middle of nowhere. There were not even any people which could have just taken me with their car to the next city or so. So I was just like praying to the universe to get me out of there. And miraculously, it worked. Like, I was racing, I think 70 or 80 kilometers to Alexandropoli, and the guys were waiting for me. They said, just call me when you're there. They gave me my tires, and from then on, Schwalbe Marathon tires.
What a story. What a story. And then eventually it was the time to meet your father.
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah, I mean, at that stage, my father lives in the middle of Turkey in Kayseri, so that's next to Cappadocia. So leading up to meeting my father, I had already spent about 1.5 months in Turkey. So I had time to experience the culture, experience the people and the hospitality. And during that time, I felt more and more Turkish. Like, I really loved the culture, I loved the food, and I could see it in myself as well. So I spent my first birthday in Turkey, and yeah, I was really happy to be half Turkish. I think when I was a child, I always wanted to be bilingual, always wanted to be a mix. And, years later, you find out you're actually a mix. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can't speak Turkish, so that was a bit challenging. Because in the rural areas of Turkey, they don't speak English. But yeah, then getting closer and closer to my father, And the weather was getting colder and colder. I crossed the Taurus Mountains, which was an amazing experience. And then, yeah, came closer and closer to this center of Turkey, where I faced really, really cold temperatures, like -9 degrees, and having to stop every hour or two to warm my feet and hands. And then, yeah, arriving at my father's place felt very strange. I had spent a few days in Cappadocia to kind of acclimatize and get myself ready for that, because I knew if I leave Göreme in Cappadocia, I only have 1 day ride left to Kayseri. And yeah, at first I thought I might not cycle straight to his apartment, but that decision then just was made spontaneous. I was like, no, I have to arrive in front of his apartment on my bicycle. I cannot go to like a host and then go there by car or walk there. No, I
Yeah,
have
that makes
to
sense. Yeah.
on my bicycle. But that was kind of a decision I made spontaneous, because I didn't want to stay at his place originally. And yeah, then I just found myself in front of his apartment block, and I sent him a text. Was like, oh, I think I'm here. And he didn't see that text for a while. So I was standing there for a while. Yeah, and during this time, I had a lot of time to think, and I was like, yeah, maybe I should just go again. And yeah, then eventually he called me and said he just saw my text. And then I started to get really nervous. And yeah, I had to turn around. I couldn't face him. I was getting incredibly shy. I guess I'm a shy person, you know? So, and I just didn't know what to do, to be honest. And then he came and I could hear him. And the first thing he said to me was, where do you have your courage from? And then, yeah, he hugged me and we went upstairs to his apartment, where I met his mother, my grandma. Yeah.
So there's
And
an entire family that comes with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Over the next, I don't know if even on the same day or if it was the day after, that I met the family. Like, I have 2 aunts, a cousin, like, no, 3 cousins, I believe, and a daughter of a cousin, don't even know how you call that. And yeah, my grandma, and so many people I had to meet. And yeah, suddenly having my own Turkish family, and it was really nice. And I guess before arriving there, I knew I had no idea how I would react and if I would be able to stay present and to forgive. But maybe the way I had reached his place by bicycle, and like this, yeah, almost spiritual experience of cycling there and being surrounded by nature, and also like feeling all of these energies being connected, and feeling the hospitality and warmth and kindness from strangers, and also staying in strangers' houses, prepared me, I think, for meeting this man, which in the end is a stranger. And like my family, which are also all strangers to me. But I think the way I traveled just really prepared me for feeling at home, and yeah, just being at ease and having no expectations.
Wow, that's a big process to go through. is there actually any resemblance? Like, is there actually like, oh yeah, I'm clearly your daughter, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So that was one thing. I never really looked like my mother. I have some things which resemble her, but growing up, I always felt a bit like the black sheep in the family. My mother is also blonde and my sister is blonde. And when I was 26 and I got to know about his identity, I immediately said I want a DNA test. But he then sent through a photo when he was my age. And I just couldn't believe how similar he looked to myself. I felt like I was looking at myself as a guy. So in that moment, I just said to my sister, oh, I guess I don't need a DNA test. And then, of course, he has aged now, so his face looks a little bit different. But yeah, we do look a lot alike. And the funny thing is that we kind of got interviewed by a Turkish newspaper and the TV. So people on the internet started to say, oh yeah, they don't need a DNA test just because we looked so similar.
Oh, and then you stayed quite a while with the family and with your father?
Yeah. I mean, people always ask me what my plan is then when I reach his place. And I said, well, I've got no idea. Anything could happen, that we just meet for a coffee and that's it. But I always kind of knew that internally I wanted to be open to stay and experience the life and culture of my family. And yeah, I love other cultures. And like I said, I really love being part of a different culture. So, and yeah, the possibility of getting to know him, seeing how he lives. In the end, I stayed for around 5 weeks, and then I felt ready. Like I needed my own space again. I needed my life back. I wanted to get back on the bicycle because then the decision was made that I would continue. And I think he kind of wanted, to keep me. But yeah, I was getting restless and I had to move on, go back to my life, as beautiful as that experience was. Also, of course, not everything was red roses, like I always call it. We, of course, had our discussions and fights, but I was mainly able to stay present. But of course, there was discussions in the past why he didn't get in touch earlier or what happened. And yeah. And after about 5 weeks, I felt ready to leave. But then the terrible earthquake in Gaziantep happened, which was actually quite close to where we were. So that was another one of these universe experiences, I call it, because sometimes during the journey I got, when you get restless and you think you should be somewhere else, you should be already here. Why am I here? I should be there. So I had that often during my journey. And in these moments, I tried to tell myself, this was actually something my flatmate said to me before I left for this journey. She said, no, you're meant to be here right now. You're meant to experience this moment. The universe has a plan for you. So throughout my journey to my father, I reminded myself to this over and over again. So this was something that was with me throughout the journey. And like I said, at the beginning or at the end, at my stay, I kind of got restless at my father's place and I was ready to leave. But then we got hit by really strong snowstorms. We had snow knee deep. So,
Oh, wow.
and the temperatures dropped during the night to minus 17 degrees because all of the center of Turkey is kind of above 1,000 meters. So carrying on that journey was impossible. So I had to delay my leave, which made me feel frustrated. I wanted to carry on. I was ready. I needed my life back. And one day I was with my father at the markets and I felt a bit grumpy because of feeling restless. And while I was walking home with him, I thought to myself, you know what? You learned this on the journey. You are meant to be here right now. You are not meant to be in Gaziantep, because I wanted to be in Gaziantep. This is where my journey was going to. So that thought started to comfort me and I started to feel less frustrated. So I was like, okay, the universe has a plan, trust the universe. That evening, I went to bed and I wrote in my blog about my experience, about this frustration. And I said, you're meant to be here right now. There's a reason why you're not yet in Gaziantep. And then I went to sleep. And at 4:17 a.m., I was waking up and I was sitting up because something was happening and I couldn't quite pinpoint down what was happening. And at first I thought I'm dreaming because everything around me was moving, like the whole room. But then I never experienced an earthquake. But then it made click and I was like, oh God, it's an earthquake. And I jumped out of bed and I ran to my father. He, by the way, was sitting in the door frame filming everything. I looked at him and I was like, okay, this is not the right moment to discuss this. But yeah, the next thing, I wasn't really sure what to do. We were actually on the 9th floor.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole apartment block was going like this. It was very strong. And I kind of knew in the back of my mind, you're meant to leave the building, right? So I was looking out of the window and I saw all of these people fleeing the blocks. And I looked at my father and I'm like, should we not leave? And he said to me, well, you're not allowed to use the lift in an earthquake. And my grandma couldn't use the stairs. We were on the 9th floor. So we decided to stay. And then eventually it stopped. And I walked over to my phone and I Googled Kayseri earthquake. And it came up with the epicenter in Gaziantep. And with, what was it, 7.2 magnitude. And I looked at it, or 7.8. And I looked at it and I had goosebumps all over my body. I just looked at it and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And that just like reminded me to, trust the universe. Because for some reason, I was not meant to be in Gaziantep that day.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, that was very scary. And so after the earthquake, the snow continued, and unfortunately, like, I really had the wish to help, but you know, if you're not a doctor or not work for the fire brigade, you're not very useful for them, so there wasn't anything I could do. And yeah, so I actually took another cyclist in with my father because he was stuck in the earthquake in the epicenter in Gaziantep. So he took a bus and he came to us and he stayed with us then for a week. And from then on, yeah, everything was very uncertain. I was not even sure if I should continue with the journey because, you know, so many people died. And you're just feeling very helpless. There's nothing you can do, but you also think, well, it's kind of pointless what I am doing. But in the end, yeah, after a challenging time of sitting around, just having to sit it out, I came to the conclusion that I am still alive and that I have to continue and that I still have the opportunity to continue. So yeah, that was a very challenging moment for me.
Wow.
But yeah, because I think I wrote in my blog that we have to continue because we don't know what tomorrow brings.
Mhm.
Like, so.
Mhm. And when you say continue, the plan was what? To cycle all the way to Australia? I mean, minus the water?
Yeah, so I have to say pretty early on during the journey, I thought, wow, I don't think I can stop in Turkey. Like, I don't know if it was because I had met other cyclists who were going further or because I thought it would get more interesting. I just felt like I couldn't stop. Like, and yeah, then there was the idea to carry on to my third culture, Australia.
Wow, that makes
Minus the
sense.
water.
Minus the water, yeah, that makes sense. But that is, I mean, for all of us who don't have the globe in front of them, that is literally like at least 2 times, if not 3 times, the distance from Germany to Turkey, right? I mean, that's just humongous. And so tell us about the route that you eventually ended up taking.
Yeah, so originally I was hoping to go through the east of Turkey and then through Iraq, then Iran. However, due to the earthquake and due to the political situation in Iran, I then decided against Iran. And instead, the Middle East suddenly opened up to me, which I actually have not seen as a possibility beforehand. So unfortunately, I had to take a plane from Antalya to Tel Aviv.
To skip Syria. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, because you can't go through Syria. You can also not go through Lebanon. And the south of Iraq, you need an extra visa for it. It gets more and more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
If you're European, Europe is nice. You don't need visas. You don't have any worries. After that, you have to deal with visas.
Right.
Yeah. So in the end, I decided to go to Israel and Palestine and continue my journey from there.
And then you went through Jordan,
Jordan,
Saudi Arabia, UAE.
Saudi Arabia. Yes. And then in UAE, I then took again a flight to jump over the water. So that was Dubai to Karachi in Pakistan.
Okay. And then Pakistan, India.
That's right. And then from India, once again, via plane to Thailand.
Okay.
And
because Myanmar is too dangerous.
Exactly. I also got sick in India. So I had to, at that stage, the future of my journey was uncertain. So I cut India short and went to Thailand then to Cambodia, Vietnam, and finally Australia.
Okay. Wow. Wow. That's, I mean, I'm very meticulous when traveling and tracking all kilometers and stuff like that, and you didn't do that, but it must be between 18 and 20,000 kilometers, that journey, I guess.
Yeah, something around that. I didn't really count, but other people who did similar journeys always mentioned these amount of kilometers.
Okay. So, and now we've spent all that time on the first leg of the journey, and there's so much more to talk about. So that probably has to do a second podcast. But what, I mean, we've heard the itinerary. What were some impressions? Let's start with positive impressions, miracles. And by the way, I heard you talk about the universe. On my travels, I developed a certain kind of spirituality simply because you are very much confronted with the fact that you don't have any control. There's a control illusion. You're just so tiny in the nature, and you need some goodness out there, some miracles to help you, and maybe that's the thing that developed for me. Would you say that spirituality was also informed or coming through your traveling experiences?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at that stage, I think before my journey, I wasn't quite sure where I am with believing or not believing. And then through that, my journey, yeah, I think you had to admit that there is this feeling. Whenever I see a bike tourer, I ask them about this because I think it's so vivid that this spiritual feeling, this feeling of energy, that it's not a coincidence what is happening or who you meet or where you are at a certain place. So you start maybe thinking more about the connection of these dots. And I also experienced all religions on my journey. I mean, all major, all religions exaggerated, but yeah, Christianity, Judaism, lots of, I spent 9 months in Muslim countries, and yeah, later Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism. Yeah, so, and you see all the beauties in these religions as well. I mean, every religion has their beautiful rituals, and especially the Muslim hospitality is outstanding. Like Saudi Arabia was a place on its own. I didn't know that much about this country before I went cycling there as a solo female traveler, and I never thought I would cross Saudi Arabia on a bicycle. And I had no idea what to expect when I crossed the border, not landscape wise, not culture wise. And yeah, it was definitely mind blowing. I was also there during the time of Ramadan, and yeah, the hospitality I experienced in Saudi Arabia was outstanding. From the first moment on, people invited me into their houses. Everybody would stop and give me packages of dates, bananas, pass me a cup of tea in the middle of the desert, and yeah, made me feel welcomed. So Saudi Arabia has definitely a very special place in my heart after this journey. Yeah, it was, I mean, just crossing this country on a bicycle by itself in almost summer, like in temperatures of up to 43 degree through the vast deserts, was a challenge by itself. And it was, yeah, incredible in so many aspects.
And I mean, let's talk about fear. I mean, over that, I mean, you were fearless to start, or you're not fearless, but you were stronger than fear in order to start that journey. But you went, I mean, the scariest thing I'm always afraid of is freezing, being wet and freezing, and being wet, hungry, and freezing. And you had that in Cappadocia, and then even I mean, you were in the warmth of your father's family house, and then still to keep on trucking in winter. That has my utmost admiration. But another scary thing is having nothing to drink in a very warm environment in a desert where there's no infrastructure for hundreds of kilometers. Everything, I mean, if you're not a traveler, when you have water with you at 43 degrees outside, it means your water is 43 degrees or more. That is nothing that is very enjoyable. It kind of keeps you technically alive, but it's actually I find it quite terrible. So did you say, yeah, desert, thousands of kilometers, no problem? Or were you afraid, or did you go step by step? How did you address that?
Yeah, throughout my journey, I never try to think too far ahead, because I think if I am in Germany and I think I cycle to Australia, that thought definitely would give me anxiety. I mean, while I was in Germany, I would also not think about Turkey, right? Turkey is wide, like it's far, far away. I'm here right now. Often I could actually only think of the next 20 kilometers. I didn't really know where I would sleep at night. I didn't know where I find water, where I find food. So thinking too far ahead in a bike touring trip, that gives me anxiety. With the desert, I literally had no idea what to expect. The only thing I really prepared myself for was the sun, which probably everybody knows when they watch my photos of crossing the desert. And then at the beginning, yes, I carried tons of water around with me. I mean, in Saudi Arabia, I would really check, okay, where are the markets or where is the village? Because in Europe, you can go a bit more with the flow. But if you do that in a country like Saudi Arabia, there might not be anything for the next 100 kilometers. So you really have to plan your day after it. But here again come the amazing Saudi Arabian people into play, because pretty early on, I realized I don't need to carry that much water around with me, because they don't only give you snacks, they give you water. And here's some water. And there's more water. And if you're lucky, it's even cold.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, sometimes I probably ended up drinking 8 liters of water, and then you're just hoping that you actually get something else than water, because you can't see any more water. And water doesn't do the job anymore. So, yeah, I think once a policeman stopped in Saudi Arabia and I was at my limit. I think it was another 13 kilometers to the next shop. And it was terrible heat. I couldn't handle it anymore. And he just asked me if I need anything. And I just looked at him and I'm like, oh, do you have a soft drink? He's like, oh, no, but I can get you one. I'm like, no, it's okay. I'll make it there. Sure enough, he came back with a soft drink and some biscuits.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. That people going out of their way to help travelers that they've never met before and will never meet. But it makes total sense if you live in a desert environment that people help each other, right? And the more it gets touristy and there's a lot of infrastructure, the more it gets challenging. This is my dog barking. So you have your cat, I have my dog.
There you go.
Okay. And what I also noticed is that sleeping, I mean, where did you sleep in the Muslim countries? I mean, do they have warm showers, or is this, did you stealth camp? What's the place to go, the way to go?
So in Turkey and in Saudi Arabia and in Jordan and in UAE, I still mainly wild camped, especially in Saudi Arabia. In Jordan, I stayed a lot with hosts, but in Saudi Arabia, I was enjoying to just, really wild camp, I think I had this time from the beginning when I crossed the border to reaching my first destination 9 days later. I think it was about 750 kilometers later that I came to the first destination. And I was just camping 9 days in a row, and it was amazing because it's such a vast country. So as a woman, I never had to be afraid that there are people, because you mentioned what you are afraid of when you sleep, or like you said, you're afraid of getting wet and being cold. I think the biggest fear for solo female travelers is men. Mm-hmm. So that was also my biggest fear. And the further away I am from villages or cities or any human being, the more safe and comfortable I feel. So the better my night will be. When I'm really close to people, I sleep very badly.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'm not sure if it was the worst thing, but a very bad thing happened to you in Israel where you got, I'm not even sure what's the right term, to be molested by a male predator.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been pretty, I don't know, terrible.
Yeah, it was a horrible experience. It mainly was, I mean, I was very lucky because he actually never really found the entrance to my tent. So there was still a layer between, like the fly net was still between him and me. But yeah, getting woken up in the middle of the night by someone who tries to, sexually assault you is not a good feeling. Especially it was pitch black. I was unable to see anything. And how do you go from there? And after that, like physically, I was fine. Nothing had happened to me. I was able to fight him off, but it left me with a lot of PTSD actually. So that was very unfortunate. I suffered quite a bit after from PTSD, and it led to many sleepless nights in the tent. It led to me not wild camping for a while, because I tried to get myself back to wild camping, but the PTSD was so strong that I would bash my tent in the middle of the night and I would yell out because I thought there's someone. And I could really feel on my heart how unhealthy this whole situation was for myself. And I could feel how my jaw was clenching up so much, and I was asleep with my pepper spray in my hand and really cling onto it. So unfortunately for 1.5 months, this man, or even I still have the PTSD. I have it here in Australia when I camp, so it's still haunting me. And this man took my freedom in my tent, which is my home. And when I then came to Saudi Arabia, it greeted me with this vast landscape, and that really gave me back the safety and my freedom in my tent, my home. So I think this is why I also have such a soft spot in my heart for Saudi Arabia.
Okay, so it was a healing place to a degree, right? Where at least a little bit healing took place for you.
Yeah, it got much better. I also started to leave the outer layer of my tent off, which actually made me feel safer, because if I hear a sound, I can immediately sit up and have a 360-degree view. Because when this man tried to attack me, it was at 1 a.m. in the night. And after he left, I wasn't sure if I should leave the tent, and I couldn't see where he is. So leaving the space for me and the visibility helped me to also overcome this trauma.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I don't know what to say. It's terrible experience you had to go through there. And you shared that online, and I followed you there. And yeah, you got through that, and then maybe that desert with all these dangers was, I mean, dangers that from my perspective was something safe for you, because no man around, no predators around, and visibility and warm weather. Yeah, wow. And then I mean, let's talk about these. I mean, there's probably gazillion impressions that we will never capture in this podcast, but maybe let's focus on Pakistan and India, because very extreme countries in terms of, densely populated, one Muslim, one Hindu dominated. How, I don't even know what to say, is that I'm thinking of, I've been to India a couple of times, and thinking of cycling there, at least in the metropolitan area, is like literally committing suicide. I mean, this is even driving in a car is suicidal. What were your experiences there?
I mean, to be honest, the journey I did, you obviously gradually get to more and more risky and chaotic driving. Like, I think even like the Arabs drive like crazy, right? They love to drive fast, and cycling into Riyadh was brutal. Cycling into Dubai on a 7-lane highway was brutal. So I guess I got more and more the taste of cycling into these massive, chaotic places. Like even cycling into Istanbul, so many people are so afraid of it. I mean, it is definitely like 100% concentration all of the time, and you always have to think for other people, right? You try to cycle defensive, you try to not take too many risks, but you also have to take your place on the road. You have to be like, no, I'm here, because if you don't do that, they just really push you aside. But the thing with like a country like Pakistan or India is that because they are all used to this chaos, that there might be a tuk-tuk on the road, a car, a donkey, then there is a worker just pulling like these massive piles of, for example, rubbish he collected behind himself, and people are crossing the road and somebody's selling something, because the locals are used to looking out for each other. They will also look out for you. So they are used to that there might be a bike here and a donkey there and a camel there. And yeah, so they are much, much more aware than Western drivers might be. So, I mean, I think cycling in Pakistan was challenging because the trucks are very brutal. And honestly, at a certain stage, I just couldn't take any honking anymore. Like, I think after Pakistan, India, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and then coming to Australia, it's just silence. And yeah, just so grateful for no honking. And yeah, in Pakistan, you can see everything. Like, your lane suddenly doesn't exist because a bus comes towards you and you better jump out of the way. You can experience all sorts of things, and yes, you better jump out of the way because they might not stop.
They have better arguments, right? And I mean, you had at one point you had police protection.
Yeah. So I did kind of half of Pakistan with and half without. So the first half I tried to get around it. Pakistan, yeah, it's a country where you won't see, at least out of the cities, a lot of women on the street. So the women are mainly in the house, and they're definitely not used to seeing a woman on a bicycle. And yeah, it's a mandatory thing in Pakistan. They want to protect their travelers, the tourists. It's not great, to be honest. It does almost more harm than it helps in some ways. I guess they want to avoid any negative publicity, but yeah, I guess uneducated people see kidnapping a foreigner as a way of making money, so the police and the government tries to stop that.
Wow. So that means you were cycling, and then there was a police car following you, and when you were putting up your tent, stealth camping, they would be there with you, or how would that work?
No. So in Pakistan, I couldn't camp because of the police escort. So at the beginning, I was mainly staying with hosts. I mean, to be honest, I would probably not have camped in Pakistan even without the police escort, because it's also a very populated country, and yeah, there's lots of robbing as well. Yeah, you just have to, as a woman, you also have to be careful, right? They're not
Extra careful, yeah.
Exactly. They're not used to women cycling, and yeah, even guys don't camp there, really.
Isn't that interesting, right? There's two Muslim countries, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, and so the experience that you're having was totally different. But then again, Saudi Arabia is a lot of desert and a lot of no people.
It's a complete different experience. When I came from UAE to Pakistan, I was so surprised, because I thought, wow, nobody's following Islam here. Like, you hear about extremists, but you think actually they don't follow Islam like Saudi Arabia does, right? I rarely saw people praying 5 times a day. Probably, yes, more in the villages. But in Karachi, I saw people drinking on a Friday, the holy day. So I was quite surprised. I came from Saudi Arabia. Even I didn't drink for months, right? So yeah, this took me by surprise. And you think that Pakistan might be even more strict, but not in some ways, in other ways, because I literally visited villages where some women were not allowed to leave the house. And I stayed with these women. And then, yeah, I kind of had to split my time between spending time with the women and then spending time with the men, because they don't hang out together. So, I mean, it's like the same in Saudi Arabia. But yeah, it's I was like, oh, I wish we could just all join together.
Yeah.
I always was like half an hour here and half an hour there.
Wow. Amazing. And then did you count the amount of countries that you went through?
I believe it was 23.
23 countries. We don't know exactly, like 18,000 kilometers, 15 months later, after the start of your journey, you arrived back home. And at the moment that we are recording this is 6 months ago for you, so half a year.
Correct.
So the last part of a journey is that it's not over when it's over. It lives on in you and it does something to you. So I've learned that it changed your career for once, right? So what's your job now?
That's right. So when I came back, I wasn't really sure what I am going to do, but the universe did its things there, and I am an operations manager in a second-hand bike shop now.
Well, who would have figured? And who can have more credibility than you?
Yeah, I mean, this is particularly close to my heart, because we actually collect bikes from the street or from households when the bicycles are unwanted, and we save them from landfill, we repair them, and resell them. So it does not only cover the bicycle part of my life, it also covers like the environmentally friendly and the secondhand part of my life. And additionally to that, we also try to give bicycles to remote communities which don't have access to bicycles, like the Northern Territory and Alice Springs, so Aboriginal kids, for example. And yeah, this is also very close to my heart, because as a child, like I said, I didn't really have the possibility to ride a bicycle. So all good things seem to come together.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I mean, my tours are far from your tour there, but what I always experience is that when I come back, I find it very hard for weeks to understand what's all the hustle and bustle is about, and why everybody is not chilling, and what do my customers want from me, and all of that stuff. So how did you learn to understand the real civilized world again?
I'm not quite sure if I understand it yet, to be honest. I mean, it's already 6 months after my journey, and it does not feel like it. I think coming home, yeah, the comforts were confusing, but also nice. After the difficult chapter towards the end of my journey, I was really grateful for the small things in life, just shelter, my bed, clean air,
Water,
clean food, exactly, clean water, all the things we take for granted. And also that there's no honking, right? Just peace and quietness, and a room to myself, a room where I can close the door, because I am kind of an introvert and I do need the time for myself. And you would think, oh yeah, you traveled 15 months solo, you had enough time to yourself. But the countries I visited, you get a lot of attention, and sometimes you can't withdraw, because I kind of live outside. I live in a tent or on my bicycle. Like I don't have my room where I can close my door. So I felt like when I was coming back, I was on one hand turning a bit into a hedonist, just enjoying like good food and like just sitting in my bed and reading a book. I read countless books since I'm back. I think that was one of the things I probably missed the most on my journey. So, and finding back into reality was confusing. I mean, I tried to throw myself into things immediately. I remember that 6 days later, I was on a sailboat sailing on Sydney Harbor. But what I did not think about was being on a sailboat with about 6 strangers for 4 hours. So on a really small space where I don't know what I'm actually doing in Australia or in Sydney, or what is actually happening. And yeah, I was just like really quiet and confused. And I think the confusion continues. And in some ways, you don't want to let go of the journey, right? You want to keep it up. But eventually, somebody gave me this advice. And at first I was a bit like, what? It's my new boss actually. And he said to me, forget about the journey. And internally I was a bit like, no, I don't want to forget about it. And of course, I do not want to forget about it, and don't want to forget about all the things, all the valuable lessons that came with the journey. However, that journey is in the past. And what I learned on my journey is to live in the present and to be in the present moment. And again, I'm meant to be here right now for a reason. Maybe I can't see it so clearly right now. And coming back was definitely very challenging and yeah, sad. But, you know, now I'm trying to grow in other ways and travel in other ways until the next chapter starts.
Yeah, amazing. And that journey has widened you in many ways in terms of your horizon, the people that you've seen, your tolerance for risk, for hardship, for the unknown. And I guess that standard tourism will probably never be your thing. And I would not be surprised to find you on Facebook on another epic adventure. And that's also a feeling that I have. I live two lives, I live my life as a, as a businessman, as a family man. And then there is this other life, which is a tiny little bit in my year where for 6 weeks, I just venture out and this year cycle from Toronto to Newfoundland. And it's like I'm unpressing the pause button on a cassette recorder, an old cassette recorder. I'm that old. That part of my life continues. And then I hit pause again, have the remainder of the year, and then come back. Maybe something like that. I'm not sure if that's a metaphor that works, but that it has a place in your life somehow.
Yeah, I mean, it will definitely always have a place in my life. Like, I haven't made any decisions or anything like this. I mean, there was definitely the thought, if I just have to write my life to adventure, right? And I don't plan, so I'm waiting for this moment, and I have maybe reached it. I'm not sure, but where I know, because everybody's always like, I don't really like the question since I'm coming home. What's next? What's next? What's next? Because I don't want to just live for what's next. Because right now, yes, I'm going through a very different journey. But yeah, I might as well this journey while I'm on it.
Absolutely.
Enjoy this journey while I'm on it,
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to just search for something that's next. Deep inside, I think I know there will be many, if I'm lucky, many of these kind of journeys. But I also had to return. I was also, I got bitten by a mosquito, got a virus from it. So yeah, just stay in here and now and listen inside what's next, and not just try to find something that's next because somebody else wants to hear the answer to this question. Also, of course, for me, it was a very, very personal journey. So maybe after coming back, I, for the first time, had really time to think about meeting my father, like being half Turkish and what it means. And yeah, I mean, I remember that I was cycling through Saudi Arabia. And like I said, while I was with my father, it was a bit easier to forgive and to stay present than it was after. But while I was cycling through Saudi Arabia, and I obviously had a lot of time to think, and I was a lot by myself, like cycling sometimes through very monotonous landscape. And I came to the conclusion that growing up without my father probably made me the person who I am today. And maybe if I would have grown up with him, I would have never been so strong to do a journey like this and to have this courage and to push things, So, yeah.
You clearly made it a strength. You turned it around into something constructive that, pushes you forward, opens your doors. So that's awesome. Madeline, the last question in this podcast is, what haven't I asked you yet?
What haven't you asked me yet? I think you were curious about my hair.
Oh yeah, exactly. That was in the pre-talk. So you had long curly hair on your tour.
Yeah.
And right now, for those who can't see it, it's like, what is it, a millimeter or two max? So
It's
like very short.
Yeah, it's like shaved, 1.5 on the side and about 3 on the top.
Okay. So what
Yeah,
about that?
I guess I was reading a book about another cyclist cycling from England to Hong Kong. And back then she was a woman, now she's a man. And she talked in the book about how she makes decisions. And it is similar to how I believe I make decisions. And she thinks, or now he thinks, what would I regret not having done when I am 90 years old? And yeah, shaving my head was one of these things. And in the last few months, I just could not stop thinking about it. And in some ways, in society, it feels a bit like a risk. Oh, maybe I'm seen as less attractive, or I don't know, maybe I can't get certain jobs, or what will people's reaction be? And I just knew I had to do it for myself. And in the end, it doesn't matter what people's reaction is, because it is deep inside of me, and I knew I would regret it if I don't have the courage to do it. And during my journey, there was this one quote that I reminded myself daily to. It actually hangs in my kitchen on a post-it, and it says, "One can always go back to safety or forward towards growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again." And I think I try to live after this, because I definitely had a lot of fear on my journey, but fear also keeps us safe, and fear is there to be overcome.
Wow, that's quite a powerful closure statement. Thank you, Madeline, for this great conversation. Very, very inspiring, and also very informative. And since you took a route that I will be taking in the next couple of years, I might reach out every now and then and ask for your advice, if I may.
Sure, no problem.
Absolutely. Okay, so, well, good luck with whatever it is that's next, or with being in the present, in the future. And yeah, let's stay in touch. All the best to you, Madeline. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karsten.
Bye for now.
Bye.
So that was Madeline Hoffmann. What are your thoughts? Anything that touched you, that resonated with you? Write us an email, leaderstalk@leadership-choices.com. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and we'll be replying to every single of your messages. And now, all the best, stay safe, and yeah, hear you soon, see you soon at Leaders Talk. Bye for now.